No. Yep. Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of the Scrutiny Committee of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this evening, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way to indicate they wish to speak, and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. The microphone is live when the red light displays. Please switch mobile phones to silent. Should you need to leave the room during the meeting, unless it is an emergency evacuation, when the emergency exit should be used, please use the marked exit and entrance. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the front side of the car park nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. Public recording of the meeting. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. Along with myself, Robert Child, Chairman of this committee, I confirm that the following members are present and participating in the meeting. Councillors Siggy Atherton, Prue Chandler, Jeannie Douglas, Christopher Evans, Elaine Holmes, Pam Posnett, Tim Webster and Jacob Wilkinson. We also welcome the portfolio holder for Housing and Landlord Services, Councillor Ronan Brown. In addition to this, we have the following Melton Borough Council officers in attendance: the Director for Housing and Communities, Michelle Howard, the Director for Corporate Services, Dawn Garton, the Assistant Director for Housing, Alison Bennett, the Housing Asset Manager, Chris Flannery, Housing Development Manager, Tahar Majid, Senior Technical Accountant, Carol King, Senior Democratic Services and Scrutiny Officer, Adam Green, and Democratic Services Officer, Catherine Richard. Joining us remotely is the Housing Management for Strategic Projects Lead, Pam Worf. So now we'll go to the agenda, item 1. Apologies for absence. Got one apology from Councillor Margaret Glancing. I invite members who wish to do so to make declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. A member with a personal interest must declare that interest at the beginning of the meeting, but can take part in the debate. A member with a disclosable pecuniary interest or a pecuniary interest has to declare it and cannot take part in the debate and should leave the room during debate on that item. Item number 3, HRA business plan. This has been the final meeting for the business plan. It's culminated with 2 workshops during the year, and this is the final report to members. I'd like to invite Councillor Brown, portfolio holder for Housing and Landlord Services, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll be quite brief. First of all, I'd like to thank Scrutiny for looking at this, and I'd like to thank you as Chair for being patient and taking time and allow us to look at the Housing Revenue Account business plan and develop it in what I would call a good, long, timely manner that allowed officers to look at things in depth. And there's just five things that I would just like to point out before you guys go into debate and officers come in to help present the key messages of the report. The reason it's slightly delayed is that I made a decision solely to ensure that the actual business plan was stress tested, and that we took into account the new regulations coming down from the regulator for social housing on the consumer standards. So basically, I took full responsibility for that. And the reason for that being is I wanted to make sure we've got the most robust plan that we possibly can have at this stage, and that we're not continually coming back to Cabinet, to Council, to Scrutiny, to have to look at things as things change, because we know what's happening. The government have made it, I think, it was a good decision that we made, backed by officers. And as you probably have seen last week, Michael Gove, the Secretary responsible for levelling up in communities, basically laid out all of the regulations and recommendations that's going to be thrust upon social landlords. That is going to mean the Melton Borough Council is going to have to fall in line with the regime that housing associations fall into, and that's a much more stringent inspection programme, and that'll look at everything from financial and performance viability of your housing service, of our housing service, but also more importantly, how we deliver our services to our tenants and how we listen to our tenants. And that's going to mean not just a cultural change for everybody involved, but more importantly, probably for us as members to start looking at things slightly different and be a bit more business-like. The regulator is very important, and that is going to mean that as we report things and as we set our key performance indicators and our performance standards and our financial viability, that will have to be much more robustly put together than it probably has been in the past. It's about achieving decent homes and making sure our tenants are living in good, affordable, warm, as cheaply run as possible for them, due to the fact that our tenants are going to be on lower incomes than the majority of the rest of the population in the borough. That we particularly listen to our tenants, and when our tenants raise concerns, we actually take those concerns on board and we actually follow it through in a meaningful way, and actually respond clearly and in a way in which our tenants understand what we're actually saying, etc. as well, whatever that needs to be. And the other thing is there will be bumps on the road, because the environment out there is not steady. We've got inflationary pressures, which has been built into the case, which the officers will come on about. But as we go along over the years, whether it be ourselves, some of us around this table involved in it, or other people coming in, all I will say is people need to take their time, look at the challenges ahead, work through them. But as well as that, I'm pleased to hand over the officers and say that I fully endorse the work that's been done so far to get to a stage where we've got a good, robust, viable business plan that's listened to our tenants, and we'll continue to do so. And I really welcome the feedback and the input from yourselves tonight. So I'm just going to stop there, as I agreed with you, Chair. I think that there's only so much you need to say.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. It comes to the questions now. If I can open the batting, as they say, if I can refer you to 3 pages at the same time, pages 60 and 61 looks at your sensitivity analysis, and also page 11, 9.3.4. On this one, the sensitivity analysis shows some wide-ranging changes in the finances. Based on these various assumptions, we've got minus 145 million, maybe deficit, or as far as a positive 110 million, which is 255 million. If there was a change by the government on the policy for rent increase, how would you cope with it? Perhaps Michelle, can you? Who's the best person?
Okay, so if it's okay with you, Chair, I'm going to hand over to Dawn and Carol to explain in terms of the finances. But one thing that I will say is that obviously as officers will be keeping the business plan under review, and a really key document for us, which I'm sure we'll come on to in the debate, is around the asset management plan, which allows us to make sure we're really maximising the resources and the money available within the HRA. But Dawn and Carol, if possible, could I come to you just in terms of the sensitivity part?
Okay, thank you. So what the sensitivity analysis is trying to demonstrate is how robust and how figures could change over what the business plan is actually saying. So obviously all of these things might not come to pass, or they could come to pass at a different amount. So what we've done is just kind of put in certain tolerances and see, how sensitive is that? So you're right, Chair, that the rental income, if the government changed its current policy of CPI plus 1%, that would have a massive impact on, or could have a massive impact on the business plan, obviously undermining the amount of income. Similarly, actually, even if the rent policy stayed the same, but councillors chose not to go with that increase, then the income wouldn't be raised, and that could undermine the business plan. In terms of what could actually be done, then that would actually be down to, quite clearly, you would not be getting that level of income for that period of time, and officers working with members would have to decide what areas where savings could be made, whether that be staff or whether that be repairs and maintenance costs, to actually bring your budget back into a balanced position. So there'd be a variety of policy decisions that would have to be made, and that could impact, or is likely to impact, on the service that tenants would receive.
That then would affect that year's surplus of 796 or 69,000, I assume.
With that year, and it would be going
just
forward,
that.
because if you lose that rental income, you lose it forevermore. So even if you went back to that kind of increase the following year, you would lose that level for the rest of the plan. So that's why it has such a significant impact in terms of the affordability and the sustainability of the plan. So you would be having to look, as I said, for savings to try and mitigate that loss of income on an ongoing basis.
Very much. Just one more, and then I'll hold my other questions till later. At the last meeting, I asked how our finances compared with other stock holding authorities, and I note that has proceeded. I now note that Savills are saying our costs are on the high side. How are you intending to address this? And what is the reason they're on the high side? Thank you.
Okay, so happy for me to come on this one. So as you know, the business plan is part of the housing journey. The other really key document will be our asset management plan, which will be prepared for consideration by members around November time. It will inform the budget setting process, and of course scrutiny involvement, and that will be really, really welcome as well. What's going to be really important as part of that asset management plan is actually developing a really detailed forecasting and profiling around our spend. What Savills have said to us is they believe that we can make efficiencies within our procurement processes, and that we can look very carefully at that and do that proper planning and forecasting there. So once we bring the asset management plan forward, I think you will see an adjustment and a change in terms of those costings. Now, what Savills have said to us is that our rents in Melton are low. Lower than a lot of our counterparts, but our costs are on the higher side, and we do need to recognise that the housing improvement programme has likely had an impact on that. We're still moving towards a position of business as usual. Pleased to say that we are now in the final stages of procuring our major contract for our capital programme, and as we start to understand what that looks like as it's delivered, that will really help us to get some detailed costings. So just handing over to colleagues, is there anything anybody wants to add on this particular question? Just before I hand over to anyone that might want to feed in, the other thing, at an appropriate point in time, also join Housemark, which is a national benchmarking organisation. We will select the timing of that to ensure that we can maximise, what we get from that, and that will provide us with really detailed benchmarking information around the services we deliver. It's something that's used across the sector, I think, for housing associations as well as local authorities, Councillor Brown. So there are a number of things that we will do. We will keep it under constant review. And I think the other thing that's really important to note is we will have our 5-year asset management plan. We will then review that every year. We will add a 5th year every year, and we will review the HRA business plan each year as well. So, this will constantly evolve and develop. And of course, we are acutely aware of the financial circumstances around us that we're going to have to be alert to in terms of contractor prices and pressures and inflation and all of those things. So I guess it's a long-winded answer, but there are lots of things. This is not, this is a moment in time, and we will need to keep it under review.
Yeah, well, I mean, you mentioned the asset management plan. I can't get my head around it. Why wasn't it done first? Because it would have informed your business plan to have had that first, then the business plan. Why wasn't it presented to scrutiny as a first job?
Okay. So the HRA business plan, asset management plan and affordable housing plan will form a suite of documents. Obviously the stock condition survey data was the key. We needed to get that done first to then start our very long-term, very high-level projections. The team are already, as you'd expect, working on developing the asset management plan, and Savills are going to support us with that also, and happy for officers to share some further information on that. I can see, Chair, that Pam has put up her hand, I think, in response to this particular question, if it's possible to bring her in.
I understand you're logged on, Pam.
I did. Oh, that.
Sorry. Yeah, well, if you, my question was, why didn't we do the asset management plan before the HRE business plan? Because it would seem common sense that it feeds into the capital programme.
I think because as Michelle said, we needed to start with the big picture, and obviously we were getting that from the Dyson surveys. So we needed to look at how we would fare over the 30 years. And then that's led us back to saying, right, we need to go into the detail of the asset management plan. So that is sort of doing the business plan has really enabled us to say that's the next step, but we wouldn't have got there, I don't think, without doing the business plan first, because we looked at that 30-year picture and we could then work out where the issues were.
What does it mean for the this year's capital programme?
Is Chris? Oh, sorry, is Chris in the room?
So I think the important thing is that what the HRA business plan has done is identified what headroom we're working with and what the financial picture looks like based on the assumptions that we've made. And that has given us a tight first few years. The first few years are quite tight in terms of the business plan, and the headroom overall is on the low side. And that's then led to the fact that the asset management plan becomes more important, because that gives us the opportunity to review some of those assumptions that we've made in the business plan. And it also gives us the opportunity to look at the main assumptions have been around some of the revenue costs, which have been high in recent years because of the housing improvement programme. So we expect those to reduce anyway, but they've also been underspent year on year as well. So those figures that have been underspent have been used in the business plan. So I think what that does is gives us a good opportunity to review that and show how we can hopefully increase that headroom that we've got in the business plan at the moment.
You'll only have 6 months to adjust your capital programme for this year if it's not approved till September.
We are going to have some additional help from Savills to make sure that we developing the asset management plan very quickly over the summer so that it's ready for the autumn.
Just on the capital program side of things, I don't anticipate much changing in terms of the capital program as part of the asset management plan, because that's been based very closely on the stock condition data and our aspirations in terms of the capital program. So the only thing that would be reviewed year on year is the assumptions made in terms of those costs. So what we'll do as we go through tender exercises, for example, if we've made certain assumptions around the cost of a kitchen, as an example, if we tender that and it's a different cost, then we would have to update that each year. So the capital program should remain as the HRA business plan and the assumptions made in there. It will be really around the other costs, the revenue costs, that we can look at making changes.
To that, Michelle.
Thank you, if I may. So just to be, again, just to reiterate really, so the stock condition survey data is really, really important. That was a huge piece of work to give us that understanding of our stock and what investment was going to be required over the long term. Obviously, we will now be continuing to do a percentage of our stock condition surveys each year. But what that's done is given us that ability to really sort of set out what our expenditure needs to be. And I just wanted to draw members' attention to section 5 of the report, particularly 5.3 and the bullet points that follow, because what the stock condition data and then the high level business plan has allowed us to do is to be able to assure ourselves and assure you and our tenants that we can afford to maintain health and safety in our properties. Really, really important that we could demonstrate that. Also, we've been able to demonstrate that we can meet decent homes standard across our properties, that we can continue our programme to replace windows with UPVC windows, and then it's allowed us to start to look in more detail about to what extent can we address the choices that people, the choices that we have. So the things that are nice to do, we're not obliged to do. We can't do everything, and the business plan is really clear on that. But it also looks at that alongside what our tenants told us was important to them, what you as a committee told us was important as well. So without the high level business plan, we wouldn't have been able to then work that through into a detailed spending plan. So one of the main things that we were looking for, certainly I was looking for as part of this, was, is our HRA sustainable? Is it viable? Can we afford to do the things that we need to do to keep our tenants safe? And it is showing that yes, we can. And that's a really, really important point as part of the plan.
I just wanted to ask, the organisation that Michelle said we were going to join, would that be something like a peer review where they would look at what we do? I only ask because I've been to a highway briefing this afternoon, where they have peer reviews every other year. And that sounded absolute, an absolutely excellent way of looking at something as big as highways. And for us, housing is quite a big matter.
Thank you. So Housemarque is going to be as good as the data that we put into it. So it's really important that we can provide the data, that we have the expertise and the capacity to analyse the data to be able to then assure ourselves of where we and how we compare. There are a number of things that we can do in terms of peer review and working with partners. So within Leicestershire, there are a number of stockholding councils. We are working together through the Chief Housing Officers Group to look at how we support each other. So an element of informal peer review. There are opportunities through other organisations around peer review. So the Local Government Association have just launched a peer review tool. So that's something that we could consider. But another really key part of the regulatory changes is that we will also be subject to an inspection regime, as will all other local authorities. It will absolutely be in our interest and important to us that, the regulator doesn't tell us something we didn't already know. So anything that we can do to self-assess and assure ourselves is going to be important. I think another thing just to make members aware of is that in preparation for the new regulations, we are going to create a post specifically around self-assessing ourselves in line with the new regulations, the consumer standards and what's going to be required, so that we've got a proper action plan and improvement plan. So there are a number of things that we will be doing, but at the moment we've not got a formal peer review mechanism built in. Something that obviously really happy to discuss in more detail with Ronan as portfolio holder as to how we really put that in place.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a bit concerned about all this. How many houses are we talking about?
1850, around that figure.
82 it was at one
Right,
time,
okay.
probably a few. And that's all we're talking about. Yeah, I'm a bit concerned about that. And then it says here, somebody's mentioned the new affordables. Perhaps Ronan can explain about new affordables, because new affordables seem to be bought up by everybody else, not anywhere near this borough. And so we're bringing people in from other boroughs. So can you just, perhaps you could explain
Yeah,
about
Councillor
that?
Brown.
Thanks, Councillor Holmes. No, I think what the new affordables are is basically replacing and replenishing the stock that we're going to lose through the right to buy. So for the housing revenue account to be viable, you're going to have to keep a certain number of, because when it lower, if you keep selling off your stock, eventually it becomes completely unviable for any organisation to do it. We have, I think, over 600 people on our waiting list. Any new housing would be social housing, and I make no bones about the fact that we need more of this, and we need more of it in Melton Mowbray specifically, and some of our larger villages. And if we can do that through using the housing revenue account to borrow, through Homes England, through NHS England if need be, through commuting sums of money maybe where villages don't need it into town or another village, etc. That's what we should do, and especially where there's sites where the developer keeps coming to us and saying, oh, we can't put the affordables or the social rent on that. The council can actually intervene in small pockets and small parcels and take that on. And it's something that we have to do. It's all in the business plan if you read it. It's all there. It's all part of the viability of the plan going forward. So for every house you lose, you want to be trying to build another one or purchase another property, if that makes sense.
If I might come back, Mr. Chairman, I totally understand that and I get that. But when are we going to stop outside Quangos buying up affordable houses? Because we've got to have them in our borough and for our people. As you said, 600 people on the waiting list. You know, that this all wants to be put in this plan, I feel. I don't know what anybody else feels, but it is really vital that you know, charity begins at home. And I know it's not very charitable, but we've got to have our housing stock, affordables, kept in this borough. And that is, and also, before I finish, how much is Savills charging? How much are they charging for this review? Thank you.
Over to you, Michelle, please.
Thank you. So another really key policy that that sits alongside all that we do in housing that I know we've discussed previously is our housing allocations policy, and the changes that have been made within the housing allocations policy have tightened our local connection criteria, which means that you do need to have a connection to this borough in order to access housing in this borough, unless in exceptional circumstances, for example, if somebody was at risk. So that's something that has been done. I know at this scrutiny committee where Councillor Graham presented his portfolio update, it came up there also. We had a conversation there around the Section 106 agreements and the local connection cascades that link to those. All of those things are linked together. So it's something that we're very aware of. And where a registered provider acquires accommodation, affordable housing in our area, there will generally be those caveats that guide allocations. And that's something that Alison and the team then will put into place. So does anybody want to add anything?
I think just to also answer your question, a slightly different tangent is just to share some good news with Scrutiny, and that Tahir and myself, just to share some good news with Scrutiny is that Tahir and myself, obviously with Councillor Brown's approval, have been in negotiations to purchase 8 new Section 106 affordable homes. So when you talk about other people coming in and buying those affordable units, the council has now started to do that work as well. Obviously, it's a competitive negotiation and the developer wants the best price, but we have been able to secure 8 units already. And then the second item that we have on the paper tonight is the affordable housing development plan, and that sort of outlines how our plans are to not only acquire Section 106 affordable units for the council, but to also build our own in terms of how we're going to mitigate the loss of right to buy.
there
Still
was a
not happy,
supplement.
Mr. Chairman. I'm not really happy at 8 when everyone in a village of mine went out of this borough. It's not right, and this has got to be stopped.
Could you answer the question on the cost of Savills? I think you missed that one, Alison. Oh, sure.
Just to reassure Lynn, I think what we need to be careful of that we're not mixing up planning policy, which is what we do. So when we go onto a site and we're identifying the social landlord to go on that site, it's very important that the section 106 is right. And what the officers are saying is that in the last couple of months since we've adopted the new allocations policy, that is now tightened up. So the planning officers have to follow us, which I know that the issue that you're on about is that that is something that has slipped through. So going forward, there will have to be that local connection unless there's an exceptional circumstance. I know we can't resolve stuff that's gone in the past, etc. But going forward, the policies are in place, and I want to reassure that that is the message being given, and it's there in black and white in the paperwork, and that's what officers must be following.
Oh no, sorry,
Mine does relate to Savills. I don't know if you want to take it and then maybe do. So the use of consultants across a range of it.
Can you just answer the question on Savills?
Mine is related to it.
Oh,
Did
right,
you want
okay,
to take it at the same time? Or yeah. So the use of consultants across a range of areas is a major concern to this committee. Savills is an industry leader, but given the knowledge base with the cabinet member, we've got an assistant director, a director for housing. Is there an over-reliance on outside organisations to find and recognise the efficiency savings that are required within the plan?
Thank you. So if I may come in on that, and then I'll just, if it's okay, hand over to Pam Wharf regarding the commissioning of the Savills work. What I would say is this is a really important long-term piece of work for this council. The work was developed by Pam as our lead, with input from all of the offices that you see here, and with support all the way through from Councillor Brown as portfolio holder. One thing we wanted to make sure that we could do was to give you further assurance of the credibility of the plan, the stress testing within the plan, and that somebody who works across the whole sector could give us that assurance and support, really, to give us that confidence and to give you that confidence. So in answer to your question, have we had an over-reliance on consultants for this piece of work? I would say no. Do we feel that we've achieved value for money by bringing in external support for specific elements of it? Yes, I'm confident with that. And equally, I'm very supportive of Savills supporting us with the asset management plan, but deliberately what we're not doing is asking them to write it for us. It's our responsibility. And it's really important that we build that expertise and the, I guess, the methodology to make sure that we can update it every year as well without the reliance on an external consultant. What we've asked Savills to do in terms of the asset management plan is support us at 3 key points. So the beginning, the middle and the end. So Chris has developed with Ali the framework for the asset management plan. And what we will ask Savills to do is check that for us and make sure that what we're doing is the approach in the right way. We've asked them to check it at a midpoint and then to help us as we come to the end of that piece of work as well. So trying to use consultants in the right way to make sure that it really adds some value and can give us that confidence. And for me, as director of responsibility for this, I feel responsible for being able to give you that confidence and assurance with that extra validation, which I feel is really important. Did you want to come in, Councillor Brown, before I hand to Pam on that one?
Just quickly says that yes, you're correct, Councillor Wilkinson. I work in the sector of just an organisation as G1 V1, and the regulator recommended to us a similar process to go through before we were inspected. What I was quite keen was that we did have a third party organisation such as Savills look at this. Was up the officers who procured, and the reason for that is that the council's not really ever done stress testing before properly, and that's going to have to be something that's done going forward, and it's something that all local authorities are going to have to get used to. And the second thing is that we don't want to get it wrong. You need that opinion. Now, the other thing that Savills did input into was the consumer regulations, which no local authority is having to really adhere to at the moment. When that does come in fully, that'll put a lot more onus on that, because it's not just about the finances, it's about the behaviour of your tenants, and what you do with your tenants can affect the expenditure. So I was invited in to sit within that final briefing meeting, and I was more than satisfied with the feedback we were getting, the examples we were given, etc. I think as time goes on, hopefully Scrutiny can, as we go on the journey down the road, Scrutiny can come back in and say, well, where are we at? Just as a director here said, Michelle, that where are we at that maybe midpoint or whatever, because if you get this wrong for the likes of Melton Borough Council, your council doesn't really exist, because we're so over reliant on the house revenue account to help us function as a council, whereas you go to a larger local authority, you could possibly hive off the housing side of it and it wouldn't have much effect. But within Melton, that is something that, and that's why you have to take even more care than what you would normally have to do, probably in a, in somewhere like Birmingham or somewhere like that. There. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yes, the cost. Pam,
Shall I-
could you help? Can you help us with that? What's your knowledge?
I've just the invoice that we've been invoiced for £4,200, which is a sizable amount, but obviously, as Michelle has said, that we've used them for very specific pieces of work to review all the work that we've done ourselves. And when you see we're talking about a multi-million-pound business plan, personally, I think that's reasonable. And I would say that Steve Partridge, who did the work for us, is probably I can't think of anyone else who's as well known as he is in the sector and has such a really strong reputation. So, I do think that's money well spent. But one of the things that I've said all along, and I really can see that people have adopted that, is that this plan has to be our plan. And that's why it's been so helpful to have Scrutiny along, to get tenants involved in it, because while we could have gone to Savills and they could have produced probably a plan on a sort of template, actually this is our plan. And while they've reviewed it, the knowledge and the ability to update it is in-house.
Jacob, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I don't dismiss the work that Savills have done, but I just want to clarify from Pam that 4,200, is that work to date or the total cost that it will attribute, including with the asset review as well? Or will there be more costs to come?
There will be some more costs to come on the asset review, but I don't know what those will be. And Chris and I have certainly talked about being very careful about how we use their assistance. And we're again thinking it would be to help to have initial review. We're meeting with them this week, but as an initial review of where we are with the plan, a review at halfway and a review at the end. So we will limit the amount of their time to the absolute expertise that they have, which is really to be able to comment on the work that we are doing rather than doing the work for us, if you see the difference.
I think all this comes down to the fact that we let our housing stock get into such a mess. We didn't repair when we should have done. Members were continually at offices. And I can remember, and I know Councillor Holmes was at the meeting and possibly Councillor Posnett, when we awarded a contract to a new repair and maintenance group with an email coming through in the middle of a meeting. I mean, that was absolutely ludicrous. We didn't have time to look at what the specification or anything was. And they were absolutely abysmal. I mean, we did get rid of them halfway through, I think, but nothing was ever done. I mean, in my ward, they were coming back to Melton to get materials instead of going into Grantham. I mean, the previous contractors always went into Grantham because they got accounts at all the builders merchants there. But I mean, the time they lost and the time it took to do jobs and the fact that jobs were never completed. I mean, I think Councillor Brown, he realises that I mean, that's where, on page 60, where most of your expenditure comes from bad maintenance previously and lack of maintenance. I rest my case.
Councillor Evans, I think it was next, then Councillor Douglas.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Let's go for the positives first. Really glad to see this, and thank you so much for all the work of the portfolio holder and I'm sure all your staff in doing this. large sections of it are really good, really good. 30 years, really. I mean, I know you have to have a five-year plan, but when it comes to 30 years, I bet when we sit here in 30 years' time, if I could, which I can't, this plan will seem sort of out of date. And well, I know you're going to review it, but no one can plan 30 years, no one, because 30 years back from now, think where we were. And I just wonder about why we do that. The Savills review, the crucial thing I wonder about is, and no one said anything, what feedback did you get? Was it useful? Or was it just, oh, it's a great document, thank you very much for your time, can we have the money please? Because obviously, are you learning from that, and do you feel you will need them in the future now you've learned? Because obviously this is going to be an ongoing process each year. Are we going to be each year asking Savills for opinion on this document? Because that would worry me when it becomes an ongoing cost to me. And I know I have to be careful how I say this, 4,200 is very good money spent, as long as it's improved your document and given you an independent review of where you should be. I've got a list of about 10 questions, by the way, sorry. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I thought you might have a list when I saw you take a biscuit before you started talking. So a couple of bits in terms of the feedback from Savills. So it was incredibly useful, and because of their expertise in the sector, we placed a high level of confidence in their review, and they have reviewed our business plan at 2 stages. They've done it when it was an initial draft, and they have done it since we've done the stress testing and added in the additional information around the consumer regulations. In a moment, I hand to Dawn, because they've also done some specific work advising Dawn and Carol in terms of the stress testing. Now, Councillor Brown referred to Savills coming in to meet with us. They met with a number of officers and Ronan as portfolio holder to talk through their initial analysis of our business plan. And the way they described it, it was a really comprehensive and really effective and robust piece of work, and there were no red flags, and that was really important at the start. They did pick up that our rents were low and our costs were on the high side, and they gave us some initial advice around how we might increase the resource available within the HRA through the things that we've said. In terms of giving you some further confidence and assurance, that in this consultation section of the report, so it's section 7, which is on page 9, and you'll see there at 7.4.2, I did include that initial feedback from Savills, which confirmed that the business plan had been updated to reflect the feedback given, that it was positive and described it as comprehensive and extensive, and had been developed robustly, but also with a really positive approach to tenant engagement. So the survey work, the engagement that Pam did with tenants and with yourselves as a committee was recognised as a piece of good practice. The other thing that they shared with us, which is something that I actually hadn't realised, is that very few councils actually have a HRA business plan. It's not a legal requirement to have one, and actually we find ourselves in a strong position because we have done the stock condition survey work and we do have that plan. So as we move into a new era of regulation, we are in a much better place than we could otherwise be. Now, within the business plan document itself, you'll see on page 65 of the report, so page 47 of the document, I refer again there to the external review of the business plan. And they are the bullet points provided directly by Savills. So they talk about our operating surpluses, what will happen initially versus the longer term stage of the plan, our sort of increased capacity within the finances in the business plan. And obviously we have built the recommendations directly into the plan. The reason I'm assured that we're not going to have a continued reliance on Savills and an external consultant is because we've not commissioned this piece of work out. We have done it in collaboration. So we have led this. We've got the expertise growing and developing within the team. As you'll know, in the midst of developing this piece of work, we've had to recruit a whole new housing management team. And I think it's to the credit of all of those officers that have joined the team that we've been able to produce this today with Councillor Brown's support throughout. Because we're going to have Savills working with Chris and the team to agree the methodology for how we revise our business plan and develop our asset management plan and then update it, that is what gives me confidence. I also will be more than happy at any point to seek an external view and validation and assurance of the work that we're doing. So I hope that helps. You know, we absolutely will not shy away from that critical friend and review. It's really important. We do not want to get this wrong. You know, we talk a lot about a housing improvement journey, and I absolutely wanted to see it go in the right direction. Dawn, I think you wanted to come in, didn't you?
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, we used this consultant, I think they employed elsewhere 10 years ago now, when Carol, the HRA accountant, was new to the HRA. And at that time, we spent, well, it was tens of thousands, and that's 10 years ago, on getting a HRA business plan. But the way this consultant works, just to say how Michelle was saying, they work with you and they train you on that. So actually this time, you know, Carol's been able to do that on her own, and she's been able to work without that consultant for the last 10 years. So because it nicely set her up and did that training. This time, what they added, Carol did the sensitivity analysis, and I think the consultant came back and just suggested one more parameter that we might want to look at. And also as well, for me, what they really provided was the support on understanding what indicators we should use going forward to assess the affordability of borrowing without setting aside money to repay debt. So they've spoke to Carol, explained how to assess that, assured me that that's robust, given us those parameters, and we will use that and use that going forward without that support now. So to me, that little bit of consultancy has just kept us on the right track, following all that work we did 10 years ago now and not had to use them since.
Reassurance on that.
Could I
Chris?
carry on for a bit?
Yeah.
Until you get bored with me.
Steve Partridge is the top man. I did meet him when he came to the council 10 years ago. So, you know, I know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Have you got any further questions?
Oh, yeah. Obviously, I'm going to go for the Achilles heels that I feel we still have, which part of the business plan. One is the stock condition survey. And you're going to say to me, but we've got 80%. That's 20% we haven't got. And this document, without that 20%, because let's be honest, the reason you haven't got that 20% condition survey, because I know in my previous experience, is because tenants, especially when the condition isn't very good, are very reluctant to allow you access to see what the condition of the flat house is. What plan have you got to address that? Because we need to address that and get that as close as we can to 100%. I've checked around the country. There are councils who've got it very close to 100% when they do the condition survey. They have techniques for doing it, I'm told. I'm asking, I suppose, Michelle, how we can do that, because it was 80%. That sounds good, but that means 20%, and 20% of 1,800 is 360 houses. We haven't got a stock condition. That's a lot of houses we know nothing about. And the reason we got into this mess, and you know this, Michelle, I'm sure, and Ronan does too, as your predecessor said, is we weren't going into the houses or the flats and checking on condition. The condition went down and down and down, and we ended up with almost buildings we couldn't repair because they were so out of condition. So my concern is that, and the second one I'm going to ask quickly while I'm going, so I don't bore this committee too much, is the capital plan last year, also another Achilles in this area, was underspent by 50%. Are we going to keep month by month how we are doing this year? Because we've got big money, some going again, and it sounds like big money, but we don't want to end up in 6 months to 9 months time with 50% of the capital spend, because from my point of view as a councillor, the tenants moan when they think they're going to get something done. And that happened last year, it happened the year before. I had tenants going on to me, oh, we was promised our windows would be done next month, and it didn't happen. So I don't want officers giving them false hope again this year. That I know some of my tenants already said, we've been told it's going to happen this year. Can we assure me on those 2 points that we're trying to make progress? Because the business plan can look as good as you want it to if you haven't got all the facts and aren't delivering on the business plan.
I think with regard to the capital programme there, Councillor Evans, if you remember, I did ask officers and the portfolio holder at the time of the budget scrutiny, would the money be spent? And I am assured that it will be. If you remember, we were £25 million underspent over 5 years, and it's clearly edged in your memory. But that assurance was given in March. So we will review that as the year progresses. But I'm assured that it will all be spent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, would you like me to come back on those 2 points at this stage? If it's okay, I'll bring some of our colleagues in at the same time. So stock condition survey, I've been trying to find it in the report because I know it's in there because I remember writing it myself. And that is that one of the other things that Savills did for us was just give us some comfort around the fact that the percentage of stock that we'd seen and the profiling of the stock that we'd seen could give us confidence in actually setting out our profile for the long term. So we're satisfied that that's given us enough information to be able to produce the business plan. And in a moment, I'll just ask Chris the 20% per year and how we'll make sure that that continues on an ongoing basis. I think the other thing is the stock condition survey, if that was the only time that we went into our properties, then we have got something wrong. And something that Ali is working really closely with the team on is to make sure that we have increased contact with our tenants through our housing officers, through our intensive housing management officers. And at the moment, there is a programme of work underway across a number of teams, which means that we are visiting every single tenant in a designated property. And we're carrying out checks on their fire alarms, we're reviewing the support they're receiving, we're seeking their views on the service that we're offering. So over 600 of our tenants are receiving those visits at the moment, and Ali is coordinating a piece of work to review the feedback from those visits. We will also be led by Doug, our new tenancy services manager, having an increased presence on our estates and working with tenants, building up a proper improvement plan of things that our tenants are telling us in the moment. So, this is a journey. We are improving constantly, but we are trying to really build and increase that contact with our tenants. So I'm less worried about the number of properties we've been into because it should not be the only mechanism. But I do hear what you're saying, and I know we've had this conversation a number of times. But if I can perhaps come to Chris to talk us through the rolling stock condition surveys, because I think that's a really important part of that assurance process. Is that okay, Chris?
So just to give you some extra reassurance, those remaining 20%, we are starting to resurvey those or reattempt to gain access to those 20% in the next 2 weeks. So we've got budget available to do those surveys again. We're doing that with a focus on access because we know that a lot of those we didn't get into because of access issues at the time. So that's really where the team's focusing their efforts, rather than just sending out generic letters that say vague statements. We're being much more specific in our communication with those tenants. I think it's important to note that we do have some stock condition data for those properties. It's not a case that we have absolutely nothing. I'll give you an example. Because of the ongoing heating servicing that we do each year, we have very accurate records of all of our heating, the age that it was installed, the type of heating, the condition that it's in. So we do have key information on certain elements as well. And then, as Michelle says, we plan to keep that stock condition data up to date through a rolling programme of surveys each year. But we have recognised access is a particular issue as part of that. One of the other things that we have the ability to do now through the Northgate module is to update that stock condition data ourselves as well. So when I have officers visiting properties, we can keep that stock condition data up to date. We can also use our completed programme of work each year to update the stock condition data. So in theory, it will be kept much more accurate than it has been previously, because every time we do an improvement to our stock, if we do a programme of 100 kitchens, for example, at the end of the year, we update our system to say that they're new. So we'll be able to manage that data much more effectively than we have been able to in the past.
So if I may
just say, I'm a bit confused because obviously I'm a landlord. Every year I'm allowed to go into, obviously I have to contact them, but every year I'm allowed to go and survey that property. So I'm confused why 360 of our houses, we can't just send a letter saying, let's arrange a date, we're coming to see your property, because we own it, which is obviously what I do. And that's illegal. You are legally allowed to do that as the owner of that property. Why are we not doing that?
if we come in there, is that our tenants have got secure tenancies. There's also the Equalities Act and the Mental Health Act and various other things that people may have some various conditions. So you can't just go into somebody's home who doesn't want to allow any local authority housing association in. You may have to go for court orders. There's different ways of getting in. You might be able to get in if your EICR is less than 5 years, over 5 years, your gas safety certificate hasn't been done. There may be other reasons why that individual isn't letting you in, because we are dealing with people who are in our council housing for a certain reason, and to go and force in and go in heavy-handed could be detrimental to the individual as well. So you have to take this rounded approach to it, and that's certainly the message I've given to staff, is that we need to be more considerate of the social impact of tenants, as well as the regulatory and the impact that they may have upon us and upon their neighbours, etc., like that there. So that's what it is. The other thing is, and I think Chris will back me up on this, is that because it's council housing, you've got similar archetypes, and you'll have, so basically the date is cloned, so you take a judgment, and I don't know what the tolerance level is, but you will have taken some sort of tolerance level as to what the age the kitchens are in the same type of archetype of house, etc., and made a bit of a judgment, and that will feed into it. So the work that Savills will have done will have been very robust and will be sector wide. So what's happened here is what happens across the sector. The reason you have a 30-year business plan is because the government says you have to have it if you're going to plan and finance yourself, etc. So I'm very at ease at the moment with the work that's been done, and I'm very confident that we're certainly going in the right direction. And as the months go on and we look at how many we haven't got into, the staff would have to go in and deal with some of those issues, and some of those issues will be of significant social issues, mental health, physical health, criminality, stuff like that. There will be going in the properties, and that'll have to be addressed with by case. But I'm confident. We've talked about it. Myself and Michelle met on Friday, and we talked about it, and there's a plan there to deal with it.
Yes, I think just to add a little bit more detail to that, whilst the Dyson survey showed that there was 20% of our properties that we hadn't accessed, when we look at our compliance in terms of our gas safety, that's in the late 90s. So we are getting in the majority, 100%. So it's 100%. So we are getting in all of our properties. So please don't be concerned that we aren't. Obviously, we get a lower rate of acceptance and accessibility with the Dyson survey, because they were calling out, on a few occasions, and they were also, as Councillor Brown rightly said, able to use an element of sort of propagating figures. Obviously, when it comes to the annual gas servicing, we can't do that. We've got to get in the property, and our achievement in that area and performance is now excellent. That said, there will be people who are really challenging and don't want to let us in, and what we will have to do there is obviously try and negotiate, but ultimately we do have the legal right of entry to carry out those works, so we do have a process. And I think just to very quickly just sort of build on what Michelle was saying, we are really focused on building that face-to-face engagement with our tenants, because we see the value of it, and I think looking back at things, that's where we've really missed opportunities. And the new regulation does require us to have so much more engagement on different levels with our tenants as well. And what Chris is also looking to bring in is sort of 10% inspections on minor works, 25% inspections on major works, on repairs, and 100% on our new development work. So we are looking to really increase the number of times that colleagues go through the front door and have that face-to-face contact with our tenants, to really look after the welfare of our tenants, but also to check on our property. And then with the intensive housing management review that we're leading on at the moment, again, it's about really acknowledging the impact of, of the pandemic and other issues on our elderly and more vulnerable tenants. That's why we've started there, and just seeing what we can do as a landlord. But as we move towards the regulatory framework, we will have to really beef up how it is that we engage and empower our tenants, and it's all sort of steps on that journey. So thank you.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a note about garages on page 7, 5.3.4. I just want to feed back about some concerns that my residents have been speaking to me about, and that is that they've been applying for garages to rent out, sometimes for months, months and months, and these haven't been forthcoming. They seem to know very much about these garages, who's renting what garages. There seems to think that there are about 15 garages that haven't been rented out since the early 2000s. So you've got a lot of years there. They seem to think there's about 15 garages not rented out since about 2001. So obviously I know that this cannot be verified probably now today. They also talk about garages that are stored with junk, the junk that hasn't been moved for a long time. Now, obviously, this is all just coming back from residents. I know that you may tell me otherwise any moment, but I'm concerned about the lost revenue for the council in these garages sitting there. When I read the next paper about the affordable housing, I realise that we're actually thinking about scrapping these garages altogether and probably rebuilding, getting some more council houses there. So are we kind of keeping these garages back in reserve so that they can eventually become more houses? I don't know, but to me, there's some need for research, some kind of transparency needed for the public as well as to what's happening to these garages. In the meantime, can people rent them out so that they can use them and not wait obviously a long time? We haven't had anything back as to why these garages cannot be rented out, and we're talking about 8 months. 8 months is a long time. So I think actually I've made a lot of points here. I think overall what I'm saying is that there's signs of inefficiency and a lack of effectiveness. And obviously this is all very recent for me too, that I've ascertained this situation. So I'm sitting here prepared to listen and be put right. But anyway, over to yourselves. Thank you.
I think there's about 230 garages which are not used. I think if I'm right on that, am I? Yeah. But yes. So do you want to, Michelle, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I found being quite new to Melton was that when I looked at the situation with garages, we needed 2 key pieces of information before we could really move things forward. One is we need to know the condition of our garages. So are they fit to let? Are they used? Are they full of people's items? And are they actually signed up to a tenancy and paying that? So on one side, we've got to understand use and occupancy. On the other side, when I looked at the waiting list, I think it was about 2014. So we've quite recently, in April of this year, written out to everyone who was on the waiting list and asked them to reapply. So we know that we know who wants a garage. Chris and members of his team are going through the process of going out and assessing our garages. So we're looking at which ones we think are rented and which ones we think are available. And then we're actually testing that on the ground, because you're absolutely right. And we have an issue with these garages. Quite a lot of them, I doubt you could even get a modern car in. So what are they being used for? And if it is storage, it's not necessarily the end of the world, so long as we're being paid for that garage's use. Because we know that obviously as people change and lifestyles change, we acquire more and more items, but it's not ideal. That then leads me to why Tahir's here, and obviously item, when I put my glasses on, item 4 on the agenda, which is when we look at affordable housing and where could that go. And you're absolutely right. So what could we do with garages? Well, we can get them in a good condition and we can rent them out. We can flatten them as a temporary measure and use them for parking, just open space car parking, because we know that, again, as lifestyles change, one of the pressures that we see on our estates is a lack of parking. So we could use it in terms of additional residence parking. And then absolutely rightly, and I think what myself and Tahir are particularly interested in are which of those sites can we redevelop into affordable housing. So how do you solve a problem like garages? Well, it's not quite as straight. It's like the layers of the onion. So at the moment, absolutely looking at just getting them let and looking at, because the business case with garages is actually really quite difficult. So I don't know, we'll probably charge between about £5 and £7 a week rent on a garage. It'll cost me over £1,000 to put a new garage door on. I don't know what the roof's like. I don't know if there's asbestos in it. So when you actually run that through a business model, you can suddenly, it's quite hard to see how our traditional use of garages would stack up. So we're almost looking at, so the interim position is we need to understand our garages, which are rented, which are available, and can we get them let? The medium term is looking at the future use of that garage. So is it viable as a garage? Is it better as a car park? Would we like to redevelop it? So they're the kind of answers on there, but very happy to pass over to either Chris or to hear if they want to add into that. Thank you.
Final two questions then tonight will be from Councillor Wilkinson and Councillor Posnett on this particular paper.
Thank you, Chair. You say you need to go out and work out which are vacant and which are used. Surely you have a list. Surely you have a list of which garages, where they are,
Absolutely,
who's
we have a
renting
list of
them,
those
who's in
garages.
arrears, who's not in arrears.
Yeah, of course we have that information, but equally, there have been instances when people have just seconded one of our garages and started using it. So that's why we have to go out. And I think this is where we're finding the work and the value of spending officers' time is actually being out on the patches and understanding it, because also I need garages inspecting to make sure that they're in a lettable condition, because if we are letting a garage, we must be sure it's in a fit and safe condition. So it's actually just mopping up all of those things. So going out, we know which ones we're getting rent for, and looking at the ones that we think avoid, and just checking that we actually understand what the product is that we're taking to market.
Wasn't it?
I know we're probably not on the subject yet, but it is about garages, because they do take up a lot of people's thoughts quite often. But when we demolished garages before and built our own houses, we did say following that we wouldn't do that again, because they were so expensive to build. So I think we need to bear in mind what the cost of those are going to be if we are planning on building houses. The other thing is, if you're going to use them into car parks, you can rest assured if the resident can't see that car from their window, they won't use them. Proves it on the new estates that have got sites for garages at the rear of the houses. Nobody uses them, or very few do. So there's got to be a bit of creative thinking. If you're going to demolish them, you either rebuild a garage on that site that will house a modern car, because as you say, I mean, I live in a relatively new bungalow. It's about 14 years old. I can't get my car in the garage, you know, so, you know, but I would hate to think you were just demolishing garages and thinking, oh yeah, we'll just do it out as a car park and just finish up. Nobody uses it and it becomes an antisocial behaviour target. So they were the only comments I wanted to make about it.
I think it's a fair comment that we have to be really alive to how much it does cost us to build, because if we're talking about doing garage developments, which is often referred to as infill, it can be more expensive because we're not getting the economies of scale that we get. But sometimes it's about looking at the wider benefits, and absolutely garages they often don't look particularly good. They are, you know, they attract antisocial behaviour, and fundamentally I come to work for you to house people, not to house cars. So that's what I'm looking at there. And you're absolutely right, it can cost us more. We don't get the, you know, those efficiencies, but what we can do, and we're just in the process. So as we are a provider of social housing, we're registered with Homes England, and we're now looking to access their affordable housing programme, and that means we can access grant towards affordable housing up to, if we're really fortunate, about sort of between 20 and 30%. So that's how we can bring in additional money, which reduces the risk that the council faces. But I'm sure as ward members, you'd actually support me in saying, do you know what? It is going to be more expensive, and actually I could probably go and buy houses cheaper than I can redevelop that garage site for you. But I'm not just redeveloping a garage site, I'm taking away antisocial behaviour and I'm improving the appearance of the environment. And obviously these are homes they're at risk for the right to buy because they're new build, they're kind of protected for about 15 years, but we have to factor that in when we're doing the business case, you know, for Dawn and Carol. But sometimes it is about, you know, achieving wider goals than just the value for money on there. Maybe I didn't explain as well, but the parking option, that's almost like a gentle step towards, you know, redeveloping it. So I'm not going to have a garage there, because if I do the business case, it might not stack up to repair and rent out that garage. There might be a solution to just offer it as parking while it is that we go through planning and putting a business case together. But you're absolutely right. And people do want to be able to see their cars. And I accept that. And also people have got more cars than they can park in front of their house, particularly if we're talking about terrace stock, which you have a fair percentage of in the borough. So it is just trying to look at different and creative uses there. Thank you.
I think we've given that a good airing. The recommendation is that the Scrutiny Committee has reviewed the housing revenue account business plan and will go along and provide comments to the Cabinet. We don't need to vote on this, do we? No. Thank you, members. I'd now like to welcome the Housing Development Manager, Tahir Majid, who's going to do a short presentation on the Affordable Housing Development Plan. Welcome along to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a short PowerPoint presentation. So as there is a shortage of affordable homes in the borough, the HRA business plan recommends that new council housing remain a priority for investment. We therefore intend to increase the supply of council homes. However, we want to ensure that we don't just deliver any housing, but the best new council housing for Melton. This means delivering the right homes in the right location of the right type, built in the right way, which address housing needs and will be fit for purpose now and for many years into the future. The Affordable Housing Development Plan sets out the criteria for the way new council homes will be delivered. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm just going to be doing a short presentation about the Affordable Housing Development Plan. I will start off with a bit about the background and our objectives. I will go on to talk about the standards of new homes. I will then mention something about funding before finishing off with how homes can be delivered and our initial development programme. Go to the next slide, please. So in terms of background, there's currently a shortage of affordable homes in Melton. According to a housing needs study, a net deficit of 95 affordable homes per annum is identified. An authority monitoring report also states that the population of Melton is increasing, but there is a limited supply of homes for affordable rent in the borough. There are currently 781 applicants on the council's housing register. At the same time, the stock of council homes is being diminished due to right to buy, with a loss of 137 homes since 2006. The council can help to address the shortage of affordable homes by increasing the supply of council housing through the Affordable Housing Development Plan. Next slide, please. So the objectives of the Affordable Housing Plan are to increase the supply of affordable homes to help address housing need, to achieve high standards of design, construction and procurement, to reduce fuel poverty and promote energy efficiency, to make the best use of existing assets by redeveloping existing land and property assets where possible, and to seek new opportunities, not just to build on our own land, but to acquire property from other developers or work in collaboration with them. Next slide, please. So we expect new council homes to meet high standards, both in the way they are designed and the way they are delivered. Energy efficiency will be one of our main priorities. The council declared a climate emergency in July 2019. New council homes will incorporate energy saving measures to reduce carbon emissions and so help to tackle climate change. New homes will incorporate technology to minimize heat loss. We expect properties to be built with exceptionally high insulation standards, and we'll also explore the use of solar panels and air source heat pumps. We aim to provide housing that is efficient for us to build and efficient for occupiers to run. The council recognises fuel poverty and how rising energy prices affect the affordability of running a household. New homes will be built to the highest energy efficiency standards in order to help mitigate likely increases in energy prices. New homes will also need to meet high standards of design and provide environments where people will want to live. Homes that are durable, accessible, easy to maintain, and which will make a positive contribution to the borough now and into the future. New homes will be built to national space standards and to lifetime home standards. Tenant health and safety will be a priority. New homes will be designed to take account of fire safety, security, and crime reduction. Our standards of design will be regularly reviewed, and updated to ensure compliance with the latest building regulations. Construction of new homes will consider people with special needs. Of the 781 applicants currently on the housing register, 14 require wheelchair access. The council will endeavour to provide homes with wheelchair access in new developments wherever possible to ensure that special needs are met. Can I have the next slide, please? So standards of business refers to the way new homes will be delivered. It is important to take into account how homes will be managed in the future. The maintenance of homes will be considered early in the design stage with the asset management team. New housing stock will be designed to adhere to the asset management plan. Community engagement is also important. As part of any development proposals, we will consult with residents and stakeholders to ensure that new homes support housing needs. Information from prospective tenants about the type of homes required and the demand for locations will inform delivery. Once new homes are complete and delivered, we will obtain feedback from tenants. This will help us to consider any improvements required for future projects. In terms of procurement, all development services will take place in accordance with the council's contract and funding procedure rules. Next slide, please. So funding, this refers to how we're going to be paying for the new housing. And the options are listed. One way of funding is through the housing revenue account. As mentioned in the HRA business plan, new council housing development is an option that could be considered if we have a surplus in the HRA budget after taking account of expenditure on the maintenance of existing council homes. Borrowing is another option. We could apply for funds from the Public Works Loan Board. We also have access to right to buy receipts when council homes are sold. However, only 40% of the cost of new homes can be funded using right to buy receipts. And they are also subject to deadlines in terms of expenditure. If they're not invested within 5 years, they have to be paid to the Treasury with interest. Homes England grants may also be available to fund part of the cost of construction. We will seek grant funding wherever possible. Just to note, we are not allowed to mix a right to buy receipts funding with Homes England grant funding on the same scheme. Commuted sums is another option for funds. Commuted sums are what private developers pay to the planning department in lieu of delivering affordable homes on particular sites. We may use these funds to deliver new homes elsewhere in the borough, subject to what was agreed in the original section 106. It should be noted that all housing development projects will be subject to a business case to ensure that they are financially viable. The business case will consider the cost and income of any development scheme over the life of the asset created. The income will be in the form of affordable rent, and the cost will include the interest cost of borrowing if required. Next slide, please. So delivery of new council homes will be in any one of the following ways. We could build on council-owned land. There may be vacant sites or sites which are not well used and which could be used for developing new housing. We could convert redundant council-owned buildings in addition to council-owned land. We could acquire new homes from developers. We could acquire older properties, and we could also acquire open land. In terms of Melton Borough Council's initial housing development programme, we intend to concentrate first on council-owned land. It will be sensible to maximise the potential of existing council assets. For example, there are currently around 400 garage sites, garages on various sites throughout the borough, many of which are vacant. Some sites have the potential to be redeveloped for new council housing, though not all sites are suitable. Some are in backlands and have very narrow entrances, which means it would be difficult to get planning permission. However, some are suitable, and garage sites will be treated as a priority for new housing development. All garage sites will be assessed for potential, and a business case will be submitted for suitable schemes. There's also some vacant buildings which have the potential for conversion to housing. but these could also provide community use. Priority will be given to community use if this is required. There's also an option to acquire new build homes, as our own housing developments will take a while to deliver once you factor into account feasibility, planning, procurement and construction. It will be reasonable to acquire some homes that are already built, especially as we have deadlines for expenditure of right to buy receipts. It would be better to acquire new homes rather than old ones, as they are more energy efficient and will have less maintenance issues. However, we would consider acquisition of older properties in certain circumstances. For example, houses next to narrow entrances of garage sites may be purchased to aid the viability of development schemes. We will also be looking for opportunities to purchase open land if they have potential to develop Newcastle housing. All of the options to either develop or acquire housing will be subject to a business case, and individual reports will be presented to Scrutiny and Cabinet in due course. Next slide, please. So in terms of time frame, following feedback from Scrutiny today, we hope to present the Affordable Housing Development Plan to Cabinet on the 13th of July. This concludes the presentation. Happy to hand over to the Chair and answer questions.
First question, can you just have a look at page 101 for me? 5.4.6. It's rather a long paragraph. Based upon the numbers in the business plan as they stand, is borrowing really affordable? Because I don't think that, I think there must be some doubt there, but I'm not an expert.
I think could I hand over to Dawn?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think until we've done the asset management plan and got down to the details of some of the numbers, I think it's going to be difficult to say whether that's affordable or not at the current time, based on those ratios and analyses that we got from the consultant. So we need to do the asset management plan first.
That, you know, I still couldn't work out why the asset management plan is being brought in September when we can't actually categorically say whether borrowing's affordable. I'm still surprised at that. Just before I open it to members, how are we going to protect the council's interest if the tenants exercise the right to buy?
I can ask Alison to answer that. Yes, please. Do you want to? Okay. Yeah, so in terms of protecting the council's assets due to right to buy, with new homes, they can be sold, but they have to be sold after a certain number of years. I think it's 15 years. And also they won't be entitled to discount. They have to pay 100% of the cost to the council. So we would get 100% back if they did exercise their right to buy.
Pam, are you able to answer that question fully?
I just wanted to come back on the issue of, you know, whether we can build or not. And as Dawn says, is I think that you can see from the business plan that there is headroom over the long term, and it's about the next 3 years that we need to be clear about the pool for asset management versus new builds. But what the work we have done tells us is that we think we will be able to build. Obviously, we've also talked about government policy on rents. And when local authorities, the last time everybody got very geared up to do new build, the government did then put a halt on rent increases for, and Dawn will correct me, 4 years. And because of that, that reduced local council's ability to build. So that's why we're in a slight quandary. And we know from doing the business plan and looking strategically ahead that we should be able to do it, but it'll be that detailed work, the next stage on the asset management plan, which will enable us to know what headroom we have in the next 3 years.
Yeah, just to clarify a couple of points there. I mean, on the affordability, it's about these ratios of your income to your expenditure, the same as it would be if you were going to borrow yourself. How much, you know, what revenue have you got coming in and what expenditure is going out, and how much will interest add to that? And there's certain, what the consultants has given us is industry standards and how to work that out and compare ourselves. And the idea is that if we go below a certain industry standard, then it's unaffordable. And if obviously we've got some headroom in that. So at the current time, on the numbers that we've got on the headline business plan, it's not affordable compared to industry standards. What we need to do through that asset management plan is refine those repairs and maintenance costs based on the stock condition surveys and reset those so that we can see whether borrowing is affordable. But if you were to ask me tomorrow, could we go out and borrow for this based on that 30-year plan, I would say I do not have enough information because it doesn't look like it is compared to industry standards. I might have to refer to Carol, but just to clarify on the right to buy, for the first, I think it is 15 years, but for the first certain years, you cannot offer a discount if that discount would result in the sale being less than the cost to build. So the only time that doesn't come into its own is if you bought a house or you got a house that you acquired off affordable, off a developer, and you got a good deal on that property and the valuation was obviously higher than that, it would still go by the cost that you acquired it at before that discount was applicable.
So nothing's really changed in the 4 years since I left. It sounds as though it's very similar to the cost law.
Yeah, it's the same as,
yeah, that's fine.
the last 4 years. So there are safeguards in there, but you could still be having to offer a discount. So you wouldn't lose on the cost to acquire or to build, but you could be offering discount against that valuation.
Forward, I'll be looking at the after the asset development plan, whether the numbers will stack up to enable the council to borrow, because clearly we're unsure one way or the other, and that is key, really, the borrowing. So we've got Councillor Holmes, Councillor Evans, Councillor Chandler, Councillor Douglas, in that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask, what is the projected right to buy receipts over the lifetime of this development plan? What are you kind of anticipating they would be? And secondly, the target is 40 homes over 4 years. It's not really going to be a big dent in the 600 waiting list. You know, can't we be a bit more ambitious about what we think we can realistically achieve here and what we need to achieve, really?
I mean, I'll try to answer the second question first. In terms of targets, this was just an estimate using the budget we've got available this year, but it will be dependent on availability to borrow. If we have sufficient funds that we can borrow, then we can, of course, buy more homes or develop more homes going forward. In terms of the right to buy, can I forward that to Dawn?
Okay, so the business plan works on an average of 10 properties sold per annum and 5 new ones. So a net loss of 5 per annum is what's in the business plan. In terms of the actual receipts, that's not a revenue, so that'll be capital. So it isn't actually in that business plan. So I don't know whether we've got a value on that, have we? No, I think that's more difficult because it's capital, and so it's not actually flowing into the revenue, but it's about that 10 sold and 5 new. And then that's what's been pushed through in terms of the cost of repairs and how much income we get as well. So I've sort of answered it, hopefully.
That's fine. So really the target isn't 10, it's 5, because we're going to be selling 5, building 10. Really, aren't we?
Sorry, selling 10, building 5 per annum.
Yeah, so we'll actually be increasing our stock by 5 every year, not 10.
No,
If,
no,
if we're building, if we're buying 10 properties, but right to buy we're selling 5,
yes,
the net is 5.
Yeah, there is
as opposed to the target of 10.
Yeah, sorry, there is a minimum requirement in terms of right to buy receipt expenditure. So in terms of making sure that we spend those funds, we need to buy at least 5 properties per year. But if we have sufficient funds that we can borrow, we can buy or develop more properties.
Right, is that right, Dawn? No, I think you're misleading us there.
Sorry, sorry. I was saying, I think Councillor Wilkinson's misunderstood was a net lost per annum of 5. So we are assuming that we are selling 10 based on current rates and assuming a build of 5. So that is a loss of 5 properties per annum in the business plan.
So this plan doesn't give us a net increase in council stock. So what's the point?
No.
So what's the point in this plan then?
Because the plan doesn't contain.
Doesn't make any sense to me.
The plan does not contain those ones that we might borrow for, because it doesn't incorporate any costs of borrowing.
What I mean is the deliverable rather than the cost. So are we delivering 10 houses net per year? But gross. Are we delivering 10 new homes gross, selling 5 via right to buy? So actually we're only increasing our stock by 5 each year. That's what I'm trying to get my head around. Is that right?
It's the other way round. Sorry, the business plan is selling 10 and building 5. So a net loss of 5 is what is in that business plan.
What's the point in this development plan then, if we're getting a net loss of stock? That's what I'm trying to understand. That doesn't make any sense to me. Why are we even looking at this?
Pam wants to come in on this. Pam, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the point being that which Tahir was making earlier, if we don't spend the money that we've already had in capital receipts on homes, we will have to pay it back to government, and we'll have to pay a huge interest penalty as well. So while we might all want to build more than that, and if we can get our way through on borrowing, we can, there is a point to doing, even if you've got a net loss of 5, if you don't do it, you will be giving hundreds of thousands of pounds back to the government. And the reason why the government has set that up is because they want councils to replace their homes that they've lost through right to buy.
So if we don't build, we have to give a load of money to central government, irrespective of whether we're making a net, having a net decrease on our stock.
Yeah,
what we're doing to get a net, what we're doing, what I want to know is what we're doing to try and get a net increase on our stock. Otherwise, I understand the financial offset, but in terms of delivering for residents.
So if I can come in there, and Dawn, I'm going to ask you as well. My understanding is that's on the right to buy. Then we'll have the additional opportunities on the commuted sums. Yeah. And what this is, just before I bring you in, Dawn, to follow up, is this is a starter for 10. We have to start somewhere. Otherwise, if we have to pay back right to buy receipts, one, not only is it embarrassing, but 2, it doesn't make any common sense to just keep losing more stock and having to pay back the money plus interest as well, Don, which I believe is there. So do you want to come in on the back of that and just explain the totality of where we could be at this stage, minus obviously the fact that we don't know exactly where we are with the borrowing capabilities?
Yeah, and that's why, Councillor Evans referred earlier to a 30-year plan. This plan's going to be updated every 5 years. Well, it'll be looked at annually and then updated in terms of a rolling 5-year programme. So when you're doing the business plan, that's the point of the sensitivity analysis, because things could change. So, the temptation when you're dealing with numbers is to make sure you're prudent and you don't over show what your surplus could be, because then rash decisions could be made, and that's the point of sensitivity analysis. What you've got here is a plan, a programme to try and reverse that and to get those properties built, and it can be aspirational. And if we start off quite modest and have a kind of a proof of concept, then we can look to be more ambitious. And I think, as everybody said, if we can show and demonstrate affordability, then we can borrow and do a lot more, but we've got to start somewhere. So just because there's only those numbers built into the business plan. That's not constraining what you might do and what the work that Tahir might do, and demonstrate that we're able to afford. And then, you know, we could do a lot more than that. So it's not constraining it, it's just taking kind of a financial prudent approach to that.
Yeah, I think it's so the business plan has to identify these risks, which are the right to buy. And obviously, as your housing department, we don't actually really want the right to buy. It doesn't do us any good. We'd rather keep our stock, but it is the right that tenants have, and we have to acknowledge it and factor that in. And, you know, at the moment, so we're looking at 5, but Tahir and I have agreed the negotiation on the sale of 8 units. We've got a further 2 properties that Chris and the team are bringing back to life. So in the first year, we've hopefully bringing in 10 properties, and absolutely there is a real ambition to build, not 5 and 10 homes, but you kind of sweet points about 40 units. So looking at where we can absolutely become, a more established landlord and significantly increase, our presence in the rental market, and perhaps even looking at some more high-end rent and stuff to mix up the portfolio. But we have to talk about the right to buy, because it is a risk, and it's a threat as well, isn't it? Because we've already spoken about how would the right to buy, the tenant's house might be valued at, I'm not going to get these figures right, but for an example, £100,000. They could have a discount, on that of, I think the maximum is 84,000. So we can already see that when we're selling at the right to buy, we're not getting enough money back to build and, to do like for like. And that's why, as Tahir very usefully put forward, we have a range of pots of funding that we can look at to use, when we want to bring affordable homes in. But it's absolutely right that we talk about the right to buy in the business plan, because it is a threat. Absolutely. Do I want to build 5 houses a year? No, of course not. I want to build a lot more. But Dawn's completely right that we need to obviously and establish ourselves and how we're going to do that. And obviously, the more houses we have, the better the asset base, the easier it is for us to borrow money at a low risk. But it's just a fact of working in social housing that tenants do have that right to buy, which is a threat to the business, and we have to report on. Yeah.
Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right. You said earlier that I wasn't talking about the right thing. This is a business plan. It says affordable housing development plan. Right. So when we're talking about, and quite rightly so, a very long time ago, I wanted to start building houses again. So council houses, or whatever you like to call them, that was poo-pooed. But anyway, never mind. And Councillor Brown said, oh, we're talking about planning. If we can only build, say, 5 or 6 houses a year, which I go along with totally, then in this business plan, I'm probably totally wrong. The government perhaps won't let you. If we have got a 40% affordable housing plan for when you build new housing developments, why cannot we as a borough say that all the affordable houses cannot be bought by an association that then ships people in from other places? Why cannot we just keep those affordable houses in this borough? They can buy them, a housing association can buy them, but everybody must be in this borough. You'd soon get rid of your 600 or 700 houses then. I mean, it just seems common sense to me. And I know you are talking about a development plan. I'm at a loss.
Okay. Can somebody put Elaine right?
Yes. Yeah.
To hear.
Can Alison answer that, please?
So obviously, we have the 40% affordable housing requirement, but as members of sit on the planning committee and other bits will see that developers will fight quite hard against that viability. So initially they will look to reduce it. There's also been some recent changes in what afford.
I'm not talking about that. I am talking about, all right, it might be 35%. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about the quangos, government quangos who buy these houses and they actually put people in from out of the borough. Can we not put something in to our system that they can buy them? There's no problem with a housing association buying them, but everybody has to be from this borough before anybody else comes from anywhere else. If you've got 700 people on your list, why can't they be in the houses before anybody comes out? I mean, I know it's happening. It's coming from Beaumont, Leeds, you name it.
Councillor
And-
Brown will answer that, Councillor.
Yeah, two things. Yeah, I see where you come from, Elaine. Is that the first thing is that all the will in the world, the Borough Council hasn't got the ability to build the amount of social housing and rented housing coming in. So that's why the government allows it a free hand for the developer to pick a housing association that's got a development arm that's operating in the East Midlands. In this case, that's how the Homes England funding comes down. So there's an allocation of funding for every developer housing association. What was said earlier, what Alison was saying, what I was trying to say is that up until a couple of months ago, there was probably a few loopholes to allow some of that stuff to happen, allow people from outside without a local connection get some housing, some social rented housing or affordable rent housing. That's been closed with our new allocations policy. So you have to have a local connection. So how it would work is Homes England, 90% of the time, or the developer through the Section 106 has to put a sum of money against that. And then because they're putting that sum of money, because it's public money, it then ties it into the allocations process that Melton Borough Council operate. So going forward, you're not going to see that. It did happen in the past, but this is about moving things forward. Yep. And trying to improve that. So if that is happening going forward, that's something that you should be highlighting and bringing to the officers and saying, why is this happening? What's gone wrong? Because it should not be happening as of a couple of months ago, as of the 1st of April going forward. So a valid point, but as we're moving on, hopefully you will never see that again unless the government change that policy.
Councillor Evans.
Hi, Michelle. I haven't got a biscuit yet, but I feel as though I might need one soon. Yeah, the problem we have, and I've never been, ever since it was introduced, and I'm old enough to know when it was introduced, the right to buy scheme. Because the problem it does is you can get a 30% discount within a few years on your council estate, council house on market value, and that can go up to 70% on a discount on your, and therefore, obviously, that means we as a council could lose our stock. Well, we'll lose our stock because we cannot replace like with like because we're not getting the money back. Simple maths tells you that. And that's why I really have severe concerns about the right to buy, just because I'm trying to put this carefully, it could be used by people just to make money. That worries me greatly, because that's not what council housing should be about. It should be about providing for those who need it, not for those who might want to make money out of it, and that's what they can do. And I've got plenty of records of that in my previous life, of that happening, and it's a very sad indictment that we are losing per year our stock, because I'm sure Ronan doesn't want to do that. I need to ask the question because it's an obvious question. How many actual council houses have we built over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Because if the words none come back, then I have a real issue, because there's no point in us putting this paper together if we've been doing nothing and we've got not enough assets to do this, because that is a real concern for me, because as a council, that is a very bad record, and it will mean, you know, this is a weight step forward from where we've been, which was losing stock and not replacing it at all. But I don't see anything in this document, and maybe I'm wrong, because it's a big document, that says what our record is over the last 10 years. And surely we need to learn from why we haven't been building any housing, council housing, and other members have told me we have 0 in that column. Why we haven't been doing that for the last 10 years.
Let's find out what the answer is then.
Yeah, if I can talk to that point, my colleague's just looking to find out now. But I think it's important to explain, Melton is like any other local authority. We haven't welcomed the right to buy or encouraged it. It is a fact of the environment that we work in, and accepting that the number of properties we've built over the last 10 years might not be that significant, because, you know, we know that the housing department at Melton is on a significant journey, and at the moment and past recent years, our focus really had to be on getting our stock compliant so that we were acting as a good landlord. This business plan outlines our ambition with political support to start to increase the number of affordable homes that we've got, and looking to not only build our own sites, but to acquire those Section 106 units that we've traditionally seen housing associations buy. And obviously, you know, with myself, Chris, and Tahir, all new officers, but this year we've been able to bring forward 10 homes already, which should be completed by the end of the financial year. So we are off to a good start with that. We've gone for quite an easy win because we bought Section 106 units that are already going to be built for next month. And then the plan is to look at our garage sites, which Tahir was saying will take us longer because we've got to clear them and get planning. But we can also now look to buy those Section 106 units. The problem there is that when the developer is looking to sell the affordable housing obligations on their developments, it is a competitive process with other registered social providers. So we've got 2 options, but past performance doesn't predict the future. You can use it, but we've had different guidance now and we've got different officers. So I don't know if we've
Chair,
had any...
I need to come back on that because there is a point where I said, why have we built anything in the last 5 to 10 years? And
I can come in there, just Chris, on,
Yep.
on that one, and Dawn will be able to help me because she was here when I was here. I know for a fact that we've definitely built 10 houses in the last 10 years. Carol's not, I don't know what Carol said there, that, and we've also acquired some housing as well that we used to be all right to buy. So I don't know whether Carol or Dawn. Carol, could you help us out?
I can't remember the exact year, but I know it's within the term of the business plan, which started in 2012. We built 10 homes on 3 garage sites, and we've also acquired, I think, 12 properties in more recent years using the right to buy receipts.
Yeah, Chair, I need to come back on this because this is what staggers me. You know, you're saying we've got a history of building and doing that, and that's not in this document. And we should learn from that. Have we actually failed to use the assets from right to buy in a year? In other words, have we actually ever returned money from the right to buy scheme, or have we actually spent it all adequately? And in which case, why is it not? I'm not a historian, but the one thing they always tell me is you learn from your past. And I don't see anything reference to what our history on this is, because we're in the same right to buy scheme. How many have we built on what? And you're now saying we're built on garages, we're built on new houses. Why is that not in this scheme so we can see where we've been going for the last 5 to 10 years? Because I'm staggered that we aren't seeing that.
I don't think we've returned any
We've
money,
never
have we?
returned, yeah, we've never returned any money.
I
We've
thought
always
so.
made sure that we've used the right to buy money. We track it and we make sure. And that's why we've purchased properties. So rather than return it, we've purchased properties on the open market. But we have only done the 10 build on the 3 garage sites. And that, as we say, we're not sure, but it was around about 2013.
I'm sorry, Chair, you've gone 10 over 10 years. You're giving us a piece of work here that says you want to do 5 a year. That's yeah, but a net reduction, but it's still losing 10, gaining 5. That's 5 per year. Yet for the last 10 years, we've only been doing 1 per year, if you're right. How are we doing that if we can't, if we're spending all our money? This must be a massive increase in our spending in this area if you're going to go from 1 a year
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Michelle come in as well, but I think the difference is we did have that idea to build, and we did build on those 3 garage sites. But I think since that time, we've obviously invested, or the council has invested in the development manager post, and that's that commitment to start to build those properties, recognising that, you know, it's not just going to happen, that we've got to work at that. And that's why in front of you today, you've got that policy. And that's the whole point about moving us forward from just acquiring them on the open market and actually adding to the housing numbers in the borough through building our own.
We did also advise that 5 was a toe in the water. It's not an ambition. So obviously the 5 that we've spoken about is a kind of a toe in the water. We've spoken about having an ambition. We've got political support to significantly increase those units. And if you look across at the officers, none of us have been here for very long, and we all come with a very strong development background. That's why Michelle has appointed us, and Ronan, because they want to make this change. And the business case, as Dawn has rightly explained, is cautious. Absolutely. We're looking at and trying to understand the borrowing capacity. The 8 units that we're looking to buy will predominantly be funded by right to buy receipts and an allowance within the HRA. So we're buying those units without borrowing. When we understand more about the borrowing, and what goes with that as well is how risk averse or not Melton wants to be, then we can certainly look at how it is that we can develop. And that's why the work that Tahir's doing around looking at our existing land holdings and just sorting out our status with Homes England so we can draw down funding makes it possible for us to bring forward new homes in a way that was less risky than you've done in the past, which makes it more palatable. So I think that's the change. And I suppose that's why yes, that's what your history was, but it doesn't mean that's what your future will be. But there is change needed, yes.
Just wanted to say the idea of us building new houses isn't suddenly a new one. I've been talking about this since I was first elected in 2019. We're nearly at the end of my first term and we haven't done anything.
If I can come in there, Jacob, is I took on the portfolio in May, and the first thing that I said was there's been some clear direction that's needed to be had. They're on a journey, as the officers have said, and you're turning around. You know, it's a multi-million-pound business, although it's a small multi-million-pound business in that sense. Is that there's some challenges the council has had to overcome around getting its structure right, getting its governance right. This is the governance tonight. These are the right questions to be asking, etc. Then we need to do things. Things aren't just going to go nicely, neatly, like Councillor Childer said. We've talked about this as an acceptance that, you know, sometimes one thing has to go above another, and then you come back and you refresh it. Melton just happens to be in that situation. What's gone on in the past, Chris, you know, I'm as big a critic as any of it. I worked in it, didn't like it, etc. But we have to move on, and it's about the future generations of the town and of the borough, etc. And we can put those things in place. And if the answer is that when we come back it's unaffordable, we're going to have another question. But I don't think it will be there. I think Dawn and the team's absolutely correct to be very, very prudent at this stage, so that we're not overcommitting ourselves and then be in a worse situation, Councillor Wilkinson, where we are really criticising ourselves because we've had 2 or 3 attempts at saying that we're going to commit to more development, etc. And getting head up in the 5 at the moment, I wouldn't get too head up in that at the moment. If it's still the same case in 3 or 4 years, yes, I would do. But we will always have to, as a borough, think Melton Borough Council can do their bit. Housing associations will have to do their bit. That's just the nature of the beast, because we don't have Melton, doesn't have the tens and hundreds of millions of pounds that the housing association, who only specialize in housing, bear in mind, they don't do all the different functions that the council have. So, you know, I wouldn't be sitting here tonight, you know me better than anybody, most of you, is I wouldn't be sitting here saying this is the right thing to do if I had concerns about it. But I think it is absolutely the right approach that the officers are taking based upon the guidance that we as Cabinet have given them. You know, let's bring it back, Chair, in maybe 12 months' time and see what direction of travel we're going in, and so on and so forth.
Can I just say I thoroughly support what Ronan said. We are a small council. The county council's one of the lowest funded in the country. So therefore, that affects the funding that we get. And we have built those houses, and they were excellent houses. I know because I went to see them all. It was done since I got elected. I know I've been here longer than you, Jacob, but I've always been very pleased to think that we have done things. We have looked after our tenants to a point. We've been let down by some of the contractors that we've employed to do our housing repairs, and we've probably not been as hot on sorting that out and getting it done correctly as we should have been. But we've always done, haven't we, produced a balanced budget. We've never gone in to a lot of borrowing because we're very conscious of the responsibility we've got as a council to look after the finances of this borough. And it's all right saying, oh, you can borrow at this, you can borrow at that. The interest rate's going up. I remember when my mortgage was a 17% and thought that I'd never survive. And I don't want our council to put ourselves in that position. I want us to be able to do things, but I want us to be able to do them sensibly and not rashly, because some people think we're not doing it quick enough.
Time's moving on, so we'll take questions from Councillor Douglas, Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question was also about page 101, the 5.5.7, the 10 new homes. And I would have liked to have seen better numbers, higher numbers, but I do understand, you know, being prudent at an early stage makes for more success to build on year after year. As Dawn explained, being prudent is wise, and we do have borrowing restrictions, and Alison's mention of that business plans have to acknowledge risks and so on. So I feel comfortable about that now. But my other point, regarding 5.2.4 on page 100, about the development of the garages, I would just like to throw this in. It may seem like a minor thing, but in St John's Court, it's become a big problem, and that is consideration for the scooters. More and more people are using scooters with the disabilities linked to affordable homes. We're having more and more disabled people in affordable homes. So I think this is going to be quite a concern here. And also in St John's Court, when we came to add the pods afterwards for these scooters, it became a massive problem. We had so many meetings down there, so it must have cost thousands to put these extra meetings on, let alone site the pods, and not only just siting them but recharging them as well. So I'm just throwing this in whilst I can. I know it's a bit of an aside, but I think it's quite important, and I could have mentioned this in the last paper as well about redevelopment of garages, to consider the use of in this way. And also because in the flat areas we often have on bin days overflowing bin areas. Can we consider reallocation? I'm slipping it in whilst I can because it's quite important, I think, of more bins, please, so that we don't have a situation on bin day when bins are overflowing, a lot of garbage. Really, it's an environmental hazard. You couldn't afford for the lorry to be late or forget, or for somebody to be off sick. Those bins are dreadful. On bin day, they are full to overflowing, and I am pushing it. And so when you're building these affordables, we need these bin sites and lots of them. Thank you.
I think the points have been noted anyway there, Jeannie. I don't think you need a response because we're noting what you're saying. So the final question to Councillor Chandler.
The previous chief executive set up a subcommittee to look into the garage situation, and I can't remember what year it actually was. Ronan probably can, but it consisted of Councillor Graham, I don't know what role his was, Councillor Wright, who was chairman of CSNA, and myself as chair of planning. And we went round all the garage sites in the borough, and there were very few that were actually fit for purpose to use for housing. And what those that were have made, as Councillor Posnett said, very good housing developments. We also looked at the purchasing land, especially in the villages, to build more houses. Now, even then, and I must be going back 7 or 8 years, the price of land, building land in the villages was prohibitive. There was no way you could ever buy any land to build houses on. I mean, in my particular ward, we're desperate for affordable housing. We've got to get around the planning committee, have got to make the point to the planning officers that they can't give way on these figures of 40%, 30%. I mean, I've had a case recently where the developer got round our affordable housing officer who said, we've had enough affordables built in Bottisford, we don't need any more. We've got a crying out for them. Those that we've got that go on the open market, the for sale board goes up one day and it's got sold within a week, and they're usually local people. And this is the proof of the pudding, basically. We've got to build more affordables, and we've got to, I don't know how we're going to do it, but we've got to squeeze these developers and make them provide the allocations that they should, not let them get away with it. And I think we've really got to, all of us, get to this point to the planning department, because they're the ones that at the moment are letting us down. I'm sorry to say it, but that they certainly are. They're giving way on this to the major developers.
Yeah,
Councillor
just a final response. Prue, absolutely, totally agree with what everything you're saying. Is that I think if you look at the report that the Hares produced, etc., what it's basically saying is that they're looking at each site, and some sites will be discounted, some sites will be taken forward for development, etc., around that. There, I fully agree with the comments on the affordable housing. You know my views on that, and this is just another stick maybe that we might be able to hit the developer over the head with and say, you know what, especially on the smaller ones like they've done on this other initiative, is that, yeah, you might have 8 or 9 houses, you might say it's unviable, but actually the council can actually step in maybe on a few of them, and it helps put the pressure on, etc. But I do think, obviously working with Pam, we can and with Rob Binlos, we need to work together to try and hold them to account. So we'll make sure we take that into the Pam, into the policy briefing workshop, I believe, that you've got going on at the start of July.
There's some leeway on 106 agreements. I think instead of asking for stuff for the community, we could ask them to put more money into affordables and less into the 106s, because a lot of the 106s never get done.
Has been noted. It's a very good comment, although it's the final one. Yeah. So that just leaves me to go over the recommendation, that is endorse and provide comments on the affordable housing development plan 22-26, which confirms the council's approach for the delivery of additional homes to add to its housing stock. So the meeting is now closed at 8:31. Thank you to the officers, who total 9, and the councillors total 9. Thank you. A draw. We'll call it quits.